In late August 2005, a storm of unprecedented scale and ferocity formed over the warm waters of the Atlantic, forever etching its name into the annals of American history. This was Hurricane Katrina, a meteorological monster that would become one of the deadliest and most destructive hurricanes ever to strike the United States. Its story is not just one of wind and water, but of human vulnerability, systemic failure, and the enduring spirit of a city that refused to be washed away. The tragedy of Katrina unfolded in a series of catastrophic events, exposing deep-seated issues of poverty, racial inequality, and inadequate infrastructure, leaving a legacy that continues to shape disaster response and urban planning to this day. The storm's journey from a tropical depression to a Category 5 behemoth and its subsequent landfall on the Gulf Coast is a harrowing tale of nature's power and a nation's struggle to cope with a disaster of its own making. The genesis of Katrina began on August 23, 2005, as a confluence of a tropical wave and the remnants of a prior tropical depression over the southeastern Bahamas. Initially, it was a disorganized system, but the exceptionally warm waters of the Gulf Stream provided the perfect fuel for rapid intensification. By August 24th, the National Hurricane Center designated it Tropical Storm Katrina. Its first landfall occurred on the evening of August 25th, when it crossed the coast of South Florida as a moderate Category 1 hurricane. While its impact on Florida was relatively minor, causing some flooding and power outages, this was merely a prelude. As Katrina moved westward into the Gulf of Mexico, it entered an environment prime for explosive development. The sea surface temperatures were several degrees above normal, and the storm encountered a pocket of deep, warm water known as the loop current. This superheated oceanic fuel, combined with low wind shear, allowed Katrina to undergo a period of breathtakingly rapid intensification. Over the course of just 2 days, from August 26 to August 28th, Katrina transformed from a tropical storm into a terrifying Category 5 hurricane. Its pressure plummeted, and its maximum sustained winds roared to a peak of 175 miles per hour. The storm grew into a colossal cyclone, with its hurricane-force winds extending over 100 miles from its center. On satellite imagery, it was a perfectly formed, monstrous swirl of clouds, a terrifying spectacle of nature's raw power. The forecast track became increasingly ominous, with the storm taking a direct aim at the Louisiana and Mississippi coastline. The city of New Orleans, much of which lies below sea level and is protected by a complex but aging system of levees, was directly in the crosshairs. The dire warnings issued by the National Hurricane Center were stark and unprecedented, with forecasters predicting devastating damage and describing a storm that would leave the coastal region uninhabitable for weeks, perhaps longer. As the behemoth churned toward the coast, a sense of dread enveloped the region. On Saturday, August 27th, Mayor Ray Nagin of New Orleans issued a voluntary evacuation order, which was upgraded to a mandatory evacuation on the morning of Sunday, August 28th. He famously warned that the storm would overwhelm the city's levee system and declared the Superdome, the city's massive sports arena, as a refuge of last resort for those who could not leave. The ensuing exodus created massive traffic jams, with highways leading out of the city clogged for miles. However, a significant portion of the population, estimated to be over 100,000 people, remained. These were disproportionately the city's most vulnerable residents, the elderly, the sick, and the impoverished, many of whom lacked personal transportation or the financial means to evacuate. For them, there was no escape. They were left to ride out the storm in their homes or seek shelter in the crowded and undersupplied Superdome, hoping the city's defenses would hold. On the morning of Monday, August 29, 2005, Hurricane Katrina made its final devastating landfall near Buras, Louisiana, as a powerful Category 3 storm. While it had weakened slightly from its peak intensity, its immense size and the catastrophic storm surge it pushed ahead of it were the true agents of destruction. The surge, reaching heights of over 27 feet in some areas, was the highest ever recorded in the United States. It obliterated coastal communities in Mississippi, such as Waveland and Biloxi, where entire neighborhoods were wiped off the map leaving behind nothing but concrete slabs and debris. The surge acted like a liquid bulldozer, smashing homes, casinos, and businesses to splinters. In Louisiana, the initial impact of the wind and rain was severe, but the true catastrophe for New Orleans was just beginning to unfold. The storm surge overwhelmed the city's intricate but flawed levee and floodwall system. The failure of the levees was not a single event, but a series of catastrophic breaches across the city. The Mississippi River Gulf Outlet Canal, a man-made shipping channel often called IMSA Go, acted as a funnel, amplifying the storm surge and channeling it directly into the city's eastern flank and St. Bernard Parish. Critical floodwalls along the industrial canal failed, unleashing a torrent of water into the lower Ninth Ward. Simultaneously, other levees and floodwalls along the city's drainage canals were overtopped and breached. Water from Lake Pontchartrain poured into neighborhoods like Lakeview and Gentilly. Over the course of the day, a cascading failure of the flood protection system occurred. By the morning of August 30th, it was clear that a humanitarian crisis of epic proportions was underway. Approximately 80% of New Orleans was submerged, with floodwaters reaching depths of up to 20 feet in some areas. The city had become a toxic, debris-filled lake. The aftermath of the flooding was a scene of apocalyptic horror. Tens of thousands of people were stranded on rooftops, in attics and on isolated patches of high ground, desperately signaling for help. The infrastructure of the city had completely collapsed. There was no power, no clean water, and no communication. Emergency services were overwhelmed and in many cases completely incapacitated. The initial response from local, state, and federal authorities was widely criticized as slow, disorganized, and inadequate. The world watched in horror as news channels broadcast images of desperate citizens, many of them elderly and African American, begging for food and water. The Superdome and the New Orleans Convention Center, which had become de facto shelters, descended into chaos and squalor, lacking sufficient supplies, sanitation, and security. Reports of violence and lawlessness, some later found to be exaggerated, added to the atmosphere of fear and desperation. The rescue efforts that followed were heroic but chaotic. The U.S. Coast Guard conducted an unprecedented number of airborne rescues, plucking thousands of people from rooftops. A flotilla of private boats, dubbed the Cajun Navy, converged on the city, with ordinary citizens risking their own lives to save their neighbors. However, the scale of the disaster dwarfed the available resources. It took days for significant federal aid and military assistance to arrive and establish a semblance of order. The evacuation of the remaining population was a slow and painful process, marked by confusion and hardship. The scenes of suffering and government failure shocked the nation and the world, exposing a deep chasm between the promise of American power and the reality on the ground for its most vulnerable citizens. The disaster laid bare the stark realities of racial and economic inequality, as the communities hit hardest were predominantly poor and black. In the end, Hurricane Katrina was responsible for over 1,800 deaths, making it one of the deadliest hurricanes in American history. The economic toll was staggering, with estimated damages exceeding $125 billion, the costliest natural disaster on record in the United States. The storm displaced more than 1 million people, scattering them across the country in the largest internal displacement since the Dust Bowl of the 1930s. The long-term recovery has been a slow and arduous process. Investigations into the levee failures revealed decades of design flaws, engineering miscalculations, and insufficient funding, leading to a massive multi-billion-dollar project to rebuild and strengthen the city's flood protection system. The demographic landscape of New Orleans was permanently altered, with its population still below pre-Katrina levels, and a significant shift in its racial and economic composition. The storm's legacy is a complex tapestry of loss and resilience, a stark reminder of the devastating consequences when nature's fury collides with human error and social inequity.